Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to Housecoat Podcasting. I am Takeshi Yamato, joining our host, the Housecoat Gamer.
Yep, and me, 117 Jorn.
And today we are discussing Lord of the Rings. We're using the Lego version because that is the only Lord of the Rings game Ron has.
Not to say he doesn't respect Tolkien and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's just all he has currently.
Yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah. But yeah. Tolkien is one of the best writers, best authors of what could be called the modern era.
That's true. That's like something a bit short. The guy was one of the. He pretty much invented the standard template for like fantasy novels going forward, basically.
Fair enough.
The concept of elves, dwarves, like pretty much orcs, general ideas for how fantasy battles were done. Like he pioneered all of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
And like there have been many attempts to sort of replicate his magic. We have certainly seen various little variations of the formula he originally started. Like, for example, there's of course Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k, because they have very similar themes, though not quite the same thing. There's of course World of Warcraft, there's the Elder Scrolls. They all have their own unique sort of thing, but they all they all aren't quite the same. I don't want to say quality, but the same atmosphere as Tolkien's work.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a lot of world building.
Yeah. And
like Tolkien's world building comes off as a lot more Shakespearean when compared to other things.
Yeah, that's for sure. Whoa. And a lot of people, and there have been a lot of different video games made of his stuff as well.
Some good, some bad.
Yeah. Like, one of my first actual Lord of the Rings games was Lord of the Rings The Third Age. That was, that had a version for the Nintendo GameCube or the PlayStation, and one for the PlayStation 2. It was supposedly a side story, but it did not work all that well.
It wasn't bad. A effective little RPG style game, but I think we're straying off topic a little. First off, we gotta get this out of the way.
What you're about to say?
I was about to say that the story did not begin with Sauron. It began with Morgoth.
Yeah.
Right. Back in the first age, I believe, right?
Yep, he was the first Dark Lord.
He is essentially the devil.
Yeah. And Sauron was basically his chief lieutenant, to put it bluntly.
Sauron was Morgoth's bottom bitch.
Not as successful.
Am I wrong?
I was about to say not as successful as Morgoth was, but
yeah. He learned.
Not successfully, oddly more infamous, I guess.
Well,
yeah,
he was
like
around
when
a
most
while
people,
longer.
because when most people think of like the big bad evil guy of the Tolkien world, usually they don't really think of Morgoth. They just automatically go to Sauron because the movies.
Yeah.
That and Sauron was around a lot longer. Let's be perfectly honest about this.
Yeah.
So, Morgoth was only a thing for the First Age. Sauron was there, Second Age, Third Age, right up
Third-
until Gollum fell into the fire.
Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah. Sauron, yeah. And what I was talking about, one more little thing for off-topic for Lord of the Rings games. One game that I find fun, I haven't played it in a while, but it's still fun, and is another one of those, is another side story thing, but much better. Lord of the Rings Online.
I've heard of it, but I've never actually had a chance to play it.
Well, it's free to play.
I'll have to give that a shot sometime soon then.
Yeah.
Just as long as they don't include any of that Rings of Power bullshit.
Let's not even start with that, please. I don't
Yeah.
want this to be any more controversial than it already will be.
Right. I will mention that it may be free to play, but it is also a lot more,
Microtransaction heavy?
yeah, I mean, you only get like a few, you only get like the first major chapter or two of the story free. There are microtransactions for more chapters and such like. And then of course there's the various expansions. Because
to pay for.
yeah. Because the original core game was just in the lands of Eriador. Then they did expansions for Moria and Mirkwood and Isengard and all of that. One of the last games that I was playing, one of the last games I played a fair bit of, one of the last times I played a fair bit of the game, they were setting up for Minas Tirith, and that was still a few years ago. So, who knows where they're at now?
Nobody knows.
Anyway, so yeah, for villains, Morgoth was just first age, but Sauron was around for pretty much everything.
Right up until the end, which brings us to, unfortunately, the rings themselves.
Yeah.
Now,
3 rings for the Elven King.
The 3 rings for the 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to fight them. 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
as much as we hate the series, they don't get while they are very loose with their adaptation, they're not entirely wrong with how they're forged. Sauron, under a elven guise, Anatar, I believe it was,
Yeah.
gave
He taught them. He taught
the ability to forge them.
Yeah.
Made the first rings for the elves, 3 of them, 2 of one of which was held by, well, I believe Galadriel was the only ring bearer we actually saw in the movies.
Yeah, Galadriel was the only one we saw in the movies. The other 2 from the books, if I remember correctly, I do have them, I just don't have them available to access right now. But the other 2 were Elrond and our favorite wizard. Because, seriously, Gandalf was badass.
Nobody's gonna argue with that. That said, they're not really wizards. They're more spirits that took the forms of old men. The Maiar, I believe.
Yeah.
Saruman, the most infamous of the lot, thought to actually take the ring instead of just serving.
Yeah.
Rings and
Wait a minute.
what?
Numenorians. I completely forgot. That's why I was going with Elendil instead of anyone else. You see, there are actually two kinds of Numenorians. The Loyalists, of which Elendil is a part of, which stayed true to the elves and all that stuff. And the Black Numenorians, that eventually, that kind of served Morgoth. And eventually Sauron.
Yeah.
I'm going to need explosives for this, aren't I?
Yeah, and speaking of Numenorians, that's that goes into the whole thing of all the different men, and technically the Numenorians are half elves in a way. There's two different kinds of half elves. One that are more like there's one that's more like men. Those would be the Numenorians. And Elrond is of the type of elf, is of the type of half-elf that embraced his elfdom.
Numenorians are very they're not immortal, but they're very tough to kill, very long-lived.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, the tale of the Numenorians goes back to the Silmarillion with the tale of Beren and Luthien. Beren was an elf. I know, Beren was a human, and he fell in love with Luthien, an elf. And their line produced, and they produced two lines of descendants. As mentioned, the Numenorians and Elrond, basically. And then, of course, there's
We're not going to get too deep into the lore, but
yeah, we won't go too deep, but that's a big part of the lore.
And now we need to talk about the other problem. The ring. The actual goddamn ring.
Oh yes, the One Ring.
Now, fans of the Jackson movies are going to be going, oh, the ring corrupted Isildur, and that's why he didn't destroy it. No, he didn't destroy it because it didn't corrupt his will. Not entirely. He claimed it as kind of a trophy. The term is weregild.
Yeah.
It did kind of corrupt him, but not entirely.
Yeah. And the same, and it did corrupt him, but not quite to the degree that most people think. And hope you don't mind the cross discussion of the cross terminology, but
Go ahead.
the ring was essentially a Horcrux.
My little uns want feeding.
It's a it's an accurate comparison, and we all know where Rowling got the idea from.
Yeah. And another term for it could be phylactery.
Otherwise used for liches, if you're from D&D.
Yep. Yeah. But yeah, either way, it is it is the same. It boils down to the same thing. The ring basically held a piece of Sauron's soul.
I'll leave for a bit, I got that. Yeah.
Something tells me Jorn is dealing with assassins.
We'll handle it.
Yeah, but yeah, the ring held a piece of Sauron's soul. If he reclaimed it, he would get his full power. But if it was destroyed, he would be destroyed.
On a related subject, the power of the elven rings, all of the rings actually, was tied to the one ring. The moment that it was destroyed, they started losing their power.
Yeah.
This was never touched upon in the movies, but let's give Jackson his due. It's a very long series.
Yeah. You're not. The books are giant. The books are very thick. You're never going to cover the entire. Even if you do 4-hour-long movies like Jackson did, you're never covering the whole. You're not covering the whole book in one movie. It might have been better. He might have had better luck if he'd done 2 movies, one for each. Two movies for each book, so 6 movies total.
He did something similar for The Hobbit.
Yeah, though with The Hobbit it was 3 books.
I thought Dead Marshes was just a name. I didn't think there'd actually be those things floating in there. I ran away so fast I dropped my fancy umbrella.
But yeah, if you're doing, but yeah, if he done that for each of the Lord of the Rings each of the books, is splitting it the way the books do. I mean, each of the installments of the Lord of the Rings trilogy is technically 2 books. Fellowship of the Ring is books 1 and 2. 2 Towers is 3 and 4, and Return of the King is 5 and 6. And book 1, so if he'd done a movie for each book in that fashion, he might have had a little better luck. Book 1 was basically Bilbo's birthday party to the arrival to the race to Rivendell and the
council.
The council was book 2. The race to Rivendell and what happened with the river. How basically it was commanded to rise up against the Nazgul. book 2 started with Frodo regaining consciousness in Rivendell, went through the council, and then the forming of the Fellowship and heading south, and ended with Frodo and Sam setting off on their own.
Very big,
So-
very, very complicated. Jackson really simplified it.
Yeah.
Credit where it's
Yeah,
due. It's not a very easy series to adapt.
Yeah, it's not that easy, but he did his best.
To the point where it has a somewhat critical success, but
Yeah.
credit where it is due.
Yes, credit where it is due.
Now, I would mention Dol Guldur and the lot, but I suspect Zorn actually wants to talk about that. That said, there's a reason we're here in the Shire.
Yeah, the Shire is.
Oh no, this actually has to tie in with a certain wizard.
Oh yeah, Gandalf. Gandalf.
Wrong wizard.
Oh.
Saruman.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. In the movies, he got stabbed in the back. By the way, Christopher Lee actually knew Tolkien.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. In the
Which is-
movies,
Which is kind of why he was Saruman. I think he wanted the role.
Yeah. But yeah, in the movies, he was stabbed in the back on the top of his
Orphaned.
tower.
Which was actually done rather realistically because Christopher Lee was Office of Secret Intelligence during the Second World War. So he had personal experience in shanking people in the back.
Yeah. Now, in
The
the
same-
books, though.
The same thing with Grima Wormtongue. He actually got out of Orthanc.
Yeah. Yeah, in the books they both got out of Orthanc. And they ended up in they basically took over the Shire. And when Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin arrived, Merry and Pippin decided to raise the Shire and basically called forth the hobbits to action and managed to defeat Saruman again. And that was where that was when Grima basically stabbed him in the back.
Though, in this case, it was slitting his throat.
Yeah.
I suspect Jackson wouldn't have wanted to do that. Mostly because throat slitting is so very difficult to pull off in effects.
Yeah.
That, and it's a little gruesome.
Yeah.
Probably would have raised the rating to an unacceptable degree.
Yeah, probably.
So we don't blame him very much for adapting it like that.
Yeah. And yeah, again, shifting the actual events to Isengard rather than the Shire is an adaptation that works. I mean, it gets Saruman out of the picture so that you can focus on other things.
But I suspect some book purists aren't exactly a fan of that.
Yeah. They probably aren't, but well, as we said, it was a big book series, and even with 4-hour movies, you can't cover everything.
And something's gonna have to be adapted out, just like The Expanse. They did what they could with that.
Yeah.
And, well, what can you do?
Yeah, what can you do indeed?